Greetings, Cornerstone Baptist Church. Anybody dropping in? This is our sermon preparation notes for this coming Sunday, March 21st. We are in Matthew 17, verses 14 through 23, and we'll have two very interesting topics in there. One of those is that the disciples, when they fail to heal a child, are going to ask Jesus why this was, and he will say, because of your little faith, and if you had just the faith of a grain of mustard seed. Well, wait a minute. Faith of a grain of mustard seed, that sounds like a little seed. That sounds like a little faith. What is Jesus really saying there? Possibly the answer is that he is saying because of your poverty of faith. Another way to translate that phrase, little faith, because you have a poverty. You are poor in faith. That poorness of faith could be because they saw the power to cast out demons that they received in, I believe it was chapter 10, though we'll confirm that on Sunday. Perhaps they saw that power as more of a sorcery type of power that is in the individual and not in God. More likely, the crux of the issue is what keeps resurfacing in chapter 16 and 17 again and again. And that is that in 16 verse 22, Jesus began teaching them that he would die and raise again. And throughout 16 and 17, they keep stumbling over this truth. They don't believe it yet. They haven't assimilated this into their theology. And so their faith is totally deficient in Jesus because they are not receiving the currently revealed revelation about him that they've had access to. The other consideration in this passage is faith healing. They were unable to cast out the demon because they had little faith. And if they had the faith of the grain of mustard seed, which again sounds like little faith, but a lot of people will go to this passage and say, if you want to be a faith healer, you need to really believe. You need to really believe hard. I mean, squint your eyes and sweat and get all emotional and just gin it up inside you, gin up that belief and make it happen. That's really not the purpose of faith healing in the scriptures as I understand it. We have a completed scripture, so I no longer have the need to call a crowd around me and say, in a moment I'm going to heal this man of this bleeding lesion and his skin is going to be like a baby's skin in just a moment, and then I'll have a message from God for you. We don't need the spectacle anymore. Yes, we do need to pray for people, and God does break through into the natural order. He does do supernatural things, but not in the spectacle healing genre like we saw when the New Testament was being established. At least that's my understanding. And in this passage, this is not a passage about how to become a faith healer. This is a passage over and over again about the revelation of Jesus Christ dying for mankind and raising from the dead. Let me show you the way this keeps surfacing real quick, and then we'll conclude today's video. Okay, I'm going to begin down here at the bottom of my page, verse 21 of chapter 16. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem. And look at this, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And this is when Peter rebuked him. And Peter was called Satan or labeled a Satan, a stumbling block. And then we go a little bit further. They were coming down the mountain. This is John, James, Peter, and Jesus. And he said, tell no one the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead. And I think raised from the dead triggered something in the disciples because we have two logic markers. Then why? So they're protesting something in that logic. Hold it. Raised from the dead. Then why do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? And the idea was Elijah was going to set everything in order. And this doesn't sound like order, Jesus dying. Well, Jesus said Elijah does come. And of course, from our perspective in 2021, we look forward to the literal Elijah coming, one of the two witnesses in the book of Revelation. He said, but I tell you, Elijah already has come. And they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they pleased. And that's speaking of John the Baptist, who Jesus said earlier in this gospel, he is Elijah if you would have received it. And in verse 12 he says, so also, just as Elijah came and they did whatever they pleased him, so also will the Son of Man certainly suffer at their hands. And they understood he was speaking about John the Baptist. You see how this issue keeps coming up? Peter being rebuked as a Satan. This protest, but Elijah's supposed to come, set everything in order. Yeah, he does. But the Elijah that came was rejected, and so also it will happen to me. Well, if we go to today's passage, the disciples, we look at verse number 16, and I've got it listed in reverse order. I hope my scrolling doesn't confuse you. But Jesus, when he sees that they could not heal this boy, He answered, "O faithless and twisted generation." Faithless. That's a pretty strong denunciation. And I think at some level it has to include the disciples here. Could include the scribes they were arguing with, according to other gospels. There were scribes there arguing. Could be the crowds. But I think it has to do with the disciples. And when they ask, why couldn't we cast them out? Because of your littleness of faith, your poverty of faith. And you need faith just a little, like a grain of mustard seed. So I think there is something entirely deficient in their faith. And I think the end of this week's passage demonstrates that this is still the issue. Verse number 22, and they were gathering in Galilee. Jesus said, the Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and he will be raised on the third day. And they were greatly distressed. This was still scandalous to the disciples. They did not have belief in this primary doctrine of the death and resurrection of Jesus. They had not yet accepted it. I think because they had received additional revelation and had rejected it, I think they were stumbling in their walk. I think that is the very crux of why they had no power of the Spirit to do the miraculous healing of the child. We'll study it more on Sunday, but be thinking about that, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, and God bless.